All right, hello everyone. Welcome to Stories for a Free Palestine. My name is Leah Holland. I use they or she pronouns, and I'm the co-coordinator for Spoken Word that booked this event. And it is my absolute favorite thing that we're doing on any of our stages because this issue is so near and dear to my heart. I'm so proud and grateful that despite significant headwinds of censorship and threat, and at this event in collaboration with one of the primary organizations supporting the largest student anti-war movement since Vietnam is here with us today on the Front Porch stage. Thank you so much to Jewish Voice for Peace Eugene, and thank you to our storytellers, and to everyone along the way whose powerful support made this event possible. And I need to give you a word of warning to anyone who's here with disrespect or hate in their heart. This stage and time belong to our speakers. Hate speech from anyone will not be tolerated and will result in your wristband being cut and/or ejection from the fair for the rest of the 2024 event at our discretion. And so that said, I'll get out of the way and welcome Anna from Jewish Voice for Peace.
Can we also just give a round of applause for our host who made this possible? This was snuck in at the last minute. So awesome. So I'll read a Jewish Voice for Peace statement in a second. But before we start, I just wanted to make sure people are aware of like the sort of complexities of Jewish identities. So does anybody know the difference between Ashkenazi and Mizrahi? It's okay. Okay, so Ashkenazi Jews are Jews of European descent. So Jews, you know, from like Poland and whatever. Yeah, Jews of European descent who, you know, lots of ancestors went through the Holocaust because that was the home of origin for them. Then, but there's Mizrahi or Sephardim Jews, which we already lived in Palestine before a European ethno-state came to like make us safe or whatever, and displaced lots of indigenous Jews, actually Palestinian Jews, like my family is from Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, Syria. So like, yeah, there is a real difference between when we say like a Jewish state or Zionism or Israel is there to protect Jews. It's actually bullshit because lots of Jews were already there and were fucking displaced by the fact that there's suddenly a nation state. So just want to say that. I'm really excited about this panel of people who have direct experience in doing on-the-ground work, fighting against Zionism. There's some other JVP members in the audience right now. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to know what's going on with us, if you live in Eugene, I have this QR code. You could just snap it and it'll add you to the announcements thread so you'll know what we're up to, what we're doing, how you can support us. Or, you know, if you're an anti-Zionist Jew and you like want to join, that would be awesome. Okay, so the statement specifically starts out with a quote from Melanie Kay. Solidarity is the political version of love. Jewish Voice for Peace is guided by a vision of justice, equality, and freedom for all people. We unequivocally oppose Zionism because it is counter to those ideals. We know that opposing Zionism or even discussing it can be painful, can strike at the deepest trauma and greatest fears of many of us. Zionism is a 19th century political ideology that emerged in a moment where Jews were defined as irrevocably outside of Christian Europe. European anti-Semitism threatened and ended millions of Jewish lives. Through study and action, through deep relationships with Palestinian people fighting for their own liberation, and through our own understanding of Jewish safety and Jewish determination, we have come to see Zionism as a false and failed answer to protecting Jewish lives. While Zionism had many strains historically, the Zionism that took hold and stands today is a settler colonial movement establishing an apartheid state where Jews have more rights than others. Our own history teaches us how dangerous this can be. Palestinian dispossession and occupation are by design anti-Zionist. Zionism has meant profound trauma for generations, systematically separating Palestinians from their homes, land, and each other. Zionism in practice has resulted in the massacres of Palestinian people, ancient villages, olive groves, families who have had just like their homes destroyed, people not able to get through checkpoints to get to hospitals, etc. So this has been going on, since the 40s, and every once in a while we see like a big blip in tension. Right now, obviously, we're in the middle of a Palestinian genocide, and leveraging our voices as Jews is actually part of what we're being asked to do by Palestinian organizations on the ground in Palestine and Gaza. There is something there about hijacking your identity politic and showing the fuck up for collective liberation. That's it. That's all I got.
Amen.
So the first person we have is a member of JVP, but also just a badass on his own. This is Shachar.
Hi, everybody. Let me just get this set up for myself. Hi, my name is Shachar Efrati. I was born in Israel, or so-called Israel. Now, I was born in 1974. The year before I was born was the 1973 war. It's called the Yom Kippur War. And during that time, I remember as a little kid being told that my family had to hide out in the basements and the bunkers underneath the buildings where I grew up, and we would go to visit those places. I would visit those places as a child, and I always felt this great fear of this boogeyman, and I didn't understand. All I had was, hey, life is really dangerous here, but it's worth it. And the Holocaust, right? So my grandparents survived the Holocaust. I have a very, very small family. And so the mantra that I heard all the time was, the world hates us. We have to defend ourselves. And I didn't know better. It sounded right to me because I didn't have I had a very small family. At the same time, being born in Israel, we moved as a family to the United States. My father really wanted us kids not to go to the army. I didn't really understand that. Nobody explained it. Now, I'm not going to go into the lack of communication that we had as a kind of traumatized people, And so in growing up, there were these different stories. Number one, quote unquote, the world hates us. Number two, we have to defend ourselves. And inevitably that means something about oppressing others. It's was never really clear as a resident in Israel. Fast forward into my 20s, I started to ask a little more questions. I started to live in the States. I went to college. I studied American history. I studied Native American history as it relates to the United States. I learned about settler colonialism. I learned about imperialism. And I was not interested whatsoever in visiting so-called Israel because, well, I was just enjoying my life outside of that conflict. Well, in my a little bit later in my life, I thought maybe I should go to Israel and find love. And I had all this pressure from my family to find a Jewish wife and have kids, and it all seemed really kind of absurd. But I said, hey, I could go to Israel and go see what's up. I know they have nice beaches. and I had kind of forgotten what my childhood was like. So there was some nostalgia about going back to the place of my birth, and who knows. Well, when I moved to Israel, Operation Cast Lead, or Operation Protective Edge, that war of 2014 broke out. And I was living in downtown Tel Aviv, near Jaffa. And it was really, see, I was not used to the level of racism that I had witnessed in Israel. I was working, and everywhere around me was all this dehumanization of the Palestinians. And at the same time, I had, having access to the English language, international news, and different reports, varying reports, I saw the number of casualties, and it was, blowing my mind and breaking my heart. And at the same time, witnessing the sheer lack of, dissonance in Israel. There was no one batted an eye about 500 Palestinian children, getting killed. And it didn't make any sense. And I remember asking my cousin, I said, hey, what do you think about, like, Palestinian? Like, don't they deserve safety and dignity in life? And he goes, no, we don't talk about that here. When you first moved here, I told you you're going to be in a Jewish state. And I said, yeah, that's right, you did. And I didn't know what that meant. And he goes, well, that's what it means. And it didn't. It hurt to. I felt really super duper complicit. My silence. And of course, during that time, like many Israelis, I went, I would go to the Dead Sea or Jerusalem or wherever in Israel, wherever you go, and you come across Palestinians, but you also come across checkpoints that that I myself did not have to go through. I just saw the checkpoints, and they seemed like, how shall I put it? In my ignorance, I have to admit, it seemed unfortunate. It seemed like tragic, but it didn't seem evil. It didn't seem foul to me. And I moved out of Israel after Operation Protective Edge because I felt really like it felt really small, and I just felt really like this place is bonkers. This is not a reality that I want to be in. Now I moved back to the States. Now I have to acknowledge that the United States is not any better. And that we are also on, this is a settler colonial project. And I felt that at least here, I don't know, I wouldn't be so close to so much vile racism and anger. Well, maybe I was naive. I admit it. What I started to do, though, is really deconstruct the programming. And by that I mean I started to read and listen to and learn from Palestinian historians, Israeli historians, that were ostracized by the Israelis. Ilan Pappé comes to mind. Rashid Khalidi comes to mind. Different authors, poets, were starting to change the way that I approached this horror show. And then Operation Al-Aqsa Flood happened in October 7th. We all know about it, I think. And then Israel retaliated by carpet bombing and dropping 4 times the amount of bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima. And it is, for me, an irrevocable, I'm changed forever. And I brought this up with my family. Hey, Are we just gonna like act as if the elephant in the room is not like bleeding to death in front of us? That's a good metaphor. And yeah, nobody had anything to say, and it was like, hey, it's not our fault. We don't know. And I said, well, can we at least acknowledge that Palestinians are getting slaughtered and this is tragic? And well, suffice it to say that I'm the black sheep of the family, and I'm doing the work on this side as best I can for Palestinian liberation. And if the price is that I don't get to talk to my family, and well, it's a small price to pay to be on the right side of history and be able to sleep at night as a decent person. And that's my 2 cents on that. Thank you all. Free Palestine. And next we're going to have Tara Hanby tell her story and her perspective on Palestine. Thank you.
Thanks, Shakar. And thanks everybody for being here. I'm going to be sitting. I hope that's okay. I'm Tara. I'm an architect working in affordable housing in Oregon. Very proud to be part of our vibrant community. I have been a holiday market vendor, and I'm a member of the Soramendi Lesbian Chorus of Eugene, and have been a member of the Oregon Tuba Ensemble. So feeling deeply rooted in my 20 years here in Oregon. I'm also a second-generation Palestinian American, and as you can imagine, it was an awful, painful day all the way around. Especially, I firmly believe that peace is possible between Christians, Muslims, and Jews, and I'm going to tell a little bit about how it was. Is that enough? In my grandparents' time, when there was that peace between the three religions. Also, this crowd is so receptive. I often find that I have to frame what I say. Coming from a Jewish perspective in some ways, so that I'm not seen immediately as a terrorist. And there are a couple of great examples, though. Rabbi Sharon Bruce is someone I've heard speak, and she talks specifically about Jewish rituals where talking and sharing and listening to each other's stories is a path for peace. And so I really appreciate everybody here. Thank you. One example is an ancient Jewish ritual where they pass behind the Temple Mount. But if you get to the end and your heart is heavy, you turn around and greet every pilgrim coming the other way. And every pilgrim has to ask why your heart is heavy, and you have to tell them your story, and they offer you a blessing. And the other, possibly even more poignant, is in current day Israel. There, on Israel's Day of Remembrance, there's a small group of Israelis and Palestinians that have lost immediate family members that gather to share their stories. So all to say, if they can do it, I feel like we can too. So my family is actually from the West Bank, a small village near Ramallah and Jerusalem. My great-grandfather bought the land somewhere between the 1850s and the 1870s. And when he bought it, it had a small olive grove and one house. And the family still owns it to this day. My great-grandfather did a lot of the work. He built the second house. He was a teacher and a mediator. So he brought in, people actually learned about other religions there. I should say, because it's part of this conflict, that my family are part of the 10% of Palestinians that are Christians. And they lived in peace in that land, relative peace. There's been other conflict, obviously. There was the First World War and Second, and that did have an impact. But in their village, there was peace. My grandfather was also born and raised there. Most of my family members were born in Jerusalem, brought home to the village. He was in the Palestinian police force, and one of his best friends was a Jewish commander. And he would come over for meals, for visits, for coffee, which was just the way. My grandmother was really known, as are many Arab women and mothers and grandmothers, for her hospitality. Anybody that came by was welcome in for coffee or tea or a meal or homemade bread or olive oil freshly pressed from the mill that my father, or great-grandfather, built. Sorry, just making sure I don't miss anything. I also just wanted to mention, because of the richness of the cultural heritage, is the embroidery that my grandmother did. You may have seen or heard of Palestinian embroidery. Like many women, she did that. And there are patterns and colors that are unique to regions of Palestine. It's broken down, and they all represent the flora and fauna and landscape. And they're passed down amongst generations. So they show a rich cultural heritage. I actually just found out yesterday that my grandfather's cousin has the largest collection of Palestinian embroidery in the Middle East, because in '67, after that war, when people were dispersing, women were selling those things because, you flee and you don't have means. And so she started gathering them, which I really appreciate. Sorry for the ums. I feel I'm here speaking for my family, but I don't see myself necessarily as a storyteller. But I really appreciate everybody's this opportunity. Thank you. I'm not quite finished yet, but I just a little. Thank you. So somewhere in the 30s or 40s, the Israeli commander that was friends with my grandfather let him know that, he said, the immigrants that are coming now from Europe are different. Or not that they're different, but they're making changes, and things are looking like they're going to start being unsettled. I don't have a lot of stories of the Nakba from my family. My uncle is 96. He's the oldest one that I could speak to still, and he doesn't really want to talk about it. I do have a sister-in-law whose grandmother was displaced when the village was evacuated and lost for 25 years. And it was the '67 war that really impacted my life. My father and many of his siblings fled before that war for obvious reasons. My father had learned to work on engines by running the machine at the olive mill, and used that to come to the States. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit later, his skills there. But he came to the States with his brother, my uncle, and they bought a auto repair shop and ran it. And as they say, that's how he met my mother. My mother didn't know that there was a wife and other children back in Palestine that followed afterwards. So they were together for a few years, and then he left her. So I have half Palestinian siblings that are older than me, and one that's younger than me, and one that was born in the very same hospital. And he was whisked off to Palestine, where he has spent most of his life under occupation and apartheid. And I stayed and lived here as a pretty much privileged lower to middle class white woman. And to me, I see just the stark differences in their lives. And there's lots of examples. There's these things that are universal, right, that we all love: music, sports, working with our hands. And they do those things in Palestine too. And I just want to, people to see Palestinians as humans and the richness of our culture, and also recognize, though, that with all of that, with every story that I hear, there's pain that comes with it as well, like the story of embroidery just being lost. Like many people, I played soccer when I was a kid, and it was just carefree, fun, didn't think much about it. My older brother, when he was still a kid, got taunted by soldiers on the soccer field and even tear gassed. And my sister was also tear gassed in middle school, where they actually tear gassed a elementary classroom full of girls. And there's, which obviously there's absolutely no rationale for that. Music is another thing. I grew up, I started playing trumpet when I was a kid, and I was a total music nerd, just completely immersed in it, and it really has been nothing but joy in my life. Like I said, I still sing with Soramundi and play my horns sometimes. My father also was a musician and played piano and accordion by ear, and was, I'm told, very talented. And he would play, when soldiers would raid the house, he would play piano to keep the situation as calm as he could. And they got to know him for that. Some of the soldiers did. They would come and use the roof of the house as a vantage point because it was a good spot in the village. And he would play to keep things calm. But again, it was always, for him, even music was tainted by difficulty. And let's see, I think I just wanted to make sure that I shared a couple of those stories, and I also wanted to just be clear again that my family feels very strongly that peace is possible. It's in our family lore about living together. My grandmother was so close with some of the Jewish neighbors. They watched each other's on their, the whole high holy days. They even breastfed each other's kids in a pinch, which I always joked, like, people always thought I was Jewish growing up. And it actually turns out I am a high percentage of Mizrahi Jewish. So if we want to have that conversation about, right? But yeah, they really just want peace. So my sister said, I asked her specifically, she said, we all believe the same. We all have the same dreams and aspirations to live it safely for our kids, to get educated, to have peace, to love your family and love your neighbor. And that's the message I want to leave. And also look on Facebook for Angels in Gaza, who's a friend of mine who is actually cooking, raising funds and cooking for people. So Angels in Gaza. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name's Ethan Guillen, and I'll just let you know I'm a crier, so watch out. I put a lot of setting spray on today. So I'm coming to you from the perspective of a Mexican-American who has done organizing with Jewish groups in solidarity with Palestinians on the ground in Palestine, driven by Palestinian needs that they have identified. And so I had the great honor of going to Palestine in 2017, I believe it was, which was the 50th anniversary of the occupation. And there was a large delegation of us there to assist Palestinians in adjusting the facts on the ground. That's something that's often discussed, is what are the facts on the ground. And one of the ways that Israel has continually changed the facts on the ground is by having settlements built on Palestinian land that the military controls. And so we went to a variety of different areas. One area that I wanted to tell you about is Hebron, because it's a very particular situation that actually relates a lot to Tara's story, that Hebron is a place where Jewish and Palestinian communities lived very closely together, and in neighborhoods that were very integrated, which is a little bit unusual in terms of like big Palestinian cities. The Hebron is unique in that it has often the Jewish settlements are on the edges of town. In Hebron, they're right in the middle of town. And in part, what had happened was as settlers, particularly settlers who became more and more radical, came along, they took over some Jewish homes in the center of Hebron that the former Jewish occupants actually did not want them to take over. It's a complicated story, but the people who used to live there were like, no, you shouldn't do this. But it was including a lot of American radicals who came and took over those spaces. And so that gives a particular flavor to Hebron because the military and the sort of military-industrial complex of the West Bank is there to protect Jewish people. It is not there for Palestinians. And in Hebron, I believe it was 1994, there's a really big settlement just outside of town called Kiryat Alba. And there was an American-born Jewish physician who was quite radical. He wouldn't treat Palestinians. He believed it was against his religion. He was quite violent in his language and eventually turned that into action. And in Hebron, there's a place called, various names, Cave of the Patriarchs, Tomb of the Patriarchs, and it has different sections for Palestinians and Jews and international people. He went in when 800 Palestinians were worshiping and waited till they were prostrate praying, and took out his automatic weapon and began shooting them, killing about 29 people, injuring about 150. They're very credible accounts that the Israeli military, just because they are there to protect Jews and don't have the most regard for Palestinians, were shooting Palestinians as they fled the violence. And nobody intervened to stop it. It was actually the Palestinians who had to disarm him and stop their own mass murder. The response to that was that the Palestinians were locked down for a month. Many of them didn't have enough food. Eventually, some of them were allowed to leave for like an hour at a time. And those lockdowns just became sporadic, normal part of life. And one of the things, as I was saying with Hebron, the settlements are right in the middle of town. And in order to, because as I said, the security apparatus is there for Jewish people and not for Palestinians, the main market street for Palestinians, one day the military showed up with welding gear and welded all the Palestinian homes shut in the front, so that this main market street became accessible only to Jews and international folks. So Palestinians now had to go out their back doors and had an entire, the town was split and all of its major markets shut. And checkpoints set up all over town. By law in the West Bank, if you're a Palestinian, you can be held at a checkpoint for 3 hours with no reason. So this incredible activist, Ada, was in school in Hebron when I was there. Anytime he had an exam, he would leave 9 hours early because he had to get through 3 checkpoints, and because he was an activist, he would inevitably be stopped for 3 hours at each checkpoint. And just the reach of the occupation is so intense and deep. Like when we were there, we were on just a walking tour with soldiers who had previously been a part of the occupation, but now wanted to draw attention to the evils of the occupation. And something the military can do at any time is declare a closed military zone. So we were just on a walking tour talking about Hebron, and they declared a closed military zone where we were. So we had to leave immediately or be arrested. That wasn't our moment to be arrested because we were waiting to be arrested later, so we left. One of the things we did in Hebron is there's this beautiful Palestinian family, a mother and her children who live in a home that is just over the wall from one of the settlements. And we went there to help them clean out the trash because the settlement would throw their trash into the home because they were trying to get these people to leave. So we were there in solidarity to help clean it up, to help them be able to stay because, again, they're trying to change the facts on the ground. And, we wanted to do the best we could. Eventually, so they did come, the military did come while we were cleaning. Our act was cleaning. We were picking up trash, and they brought us an order for a closed military zone. And luckily, we had people who were very clued into the situation. They declared it in the wrong section of town, so we kept about our business because they couldn't legally arrest us at that moment. But it's just horrifying to see the depth of how the occupation operates, because now everyone's pretty aware of the macro horrors of it, but the day-to-day horrors are really pretty untenable. From there, we went to help reestablish a Palestinian village that had been closed down due to settler violence. The settlers would come over and poison the wells of the Palestinian folks who lived there. They're Bedouins who lived in caves, and they would poison the wells, they would kill the animals, they would sow their fields with salt and other chemicals. And then the military, working hand in hand with the settlers, then declared it a firing zone. So they officially couldn't be there. So part of what we were there to do was, because the military so controls the West Bank, if they find out about anything, they are able to close the roads and close the entire West Bank within about 15 minutes. So we went in different vans through the darkness of night, camped in a nearby village on people's rooftops where we could then hike across the desert to get there so that they couldn't stop that action. And while we were there, we were basically the force, because the settlers typically are not going to show up to beat you up, kill you. The military generally will not come kill people while international people are there. They'll arrest us and deport us, but it kind of keeps things a little more chill. So while we were there, we had the camp. There was a huge celebration. It was so beautiful to have Palestinians and Jews celebrating together in that moment. And that night, the military came. They beat people up. They destroyed our camp, and we were left in the darkness. The most sort of horrifying moment of that entire time was that as the military was leaving, we were trying to get in front of their trucks to block them, but logistics, they're military, we weren't. We were all being shown in the light. Our friends have just been beaten up. It's a pretty intense situation because, it's machine guns are everywhere. And these 3 soldiers went out in front of us in the lights of the truck and took out their cameras and took selfies in front of us. And that, to be honest, was like one of the hardest moments of my life, because it was like, man, we're fucked. That's really fucked up. Like, that's such levels of dehumanization. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that agree with that sort of view. And so just to say a couple last very quick things. I've seen a lot of people who are newer in Palestinian solidarity activism suffering quite a lot. And I come primarily from the world of HIV activism. And when we get together, we party our asses off. We have such a good time. And I just want to remind everybody to take care of yourselves, because it's a long, long process. Get together. Be safe, but get a little drunk, dance, have some good times, because the weight of the human suffering is pretty unbearable. And I just want to finish with one last little thing, but when people were being beat up by the military, there was limits to what we could do. We weren't going to go grab the people with machine guns. And so we would sing them this song, and I would like us to sing it together. So I'll sing it to you once. And it's an apartheid era song, actually. Courage, my friend, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. So if you would just join me. Courage, my friend, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. Thank you all so much.
Hi, everyone. My name's Eric Brayman. I'm a storyteller and facilitator, and so we just had the gift of listening to these incredible storytellers And what we'd like to do is to take a little bit of time to just engage in a little bit of dialogue. One of the most powerful parts of storytelling is that it steps us out of our own perspectives and takes us into a little step into someone else's perspective. And that builds empathy, that builds understanding, and that builds compassion. And so the first question that I have that I'd love to hand off to you is, and whoever wants to go first, just raise your hand. What is something you heard in one of the other storytellers' stories that really stood out for you, that hit you in a special place?
Well, I really just appreciate the work that Ethan's group has done. I think that having those outside voices, like being willing to put your literal body on the line to protect somebody, is a whole other level. And also what Shakar is doing, I'm one of those that's like crying out for more Jewish people to speak up. I'm like, there's only so much I can say as a Palestinian. I feel like, and I understand, like it's not like you're one Jewish person, you can change the world, but, please speak up, keep speaking up. It's different when it comes from a Jewish person. And also try to, I'm sure if you care, you've already talked about to your family and either been disowned or had further conversations. But I really appreciate the work of both of these guys here.
Yeah, I can simply mirror what Tara's saying regarding Ethan's story. Beautiful courage. Tara as well, I think the weight of the history that you're carrying and that you gave us a glimpse into also is a politically courageous act in a time when the erasure of Palestinian knowledge, scholarship, land, of course, is so violently being uprooted. Your act is an act of resistance and resilience and inspiration for us all. So thank you for showing up and having the wherewithal to share with us your critical and really important point of view and story and history. Thank you.
It was an honor to share the stage with both of you, to hear, understanding just after the trip, I went back to Tel Aviv, to leave, and boy, was that a turnabout, so I can have some sort of sense of the struggle of you and your family and like how much it takes, the courage it takes to be like, I will walk away in order to stand up for what's right. I mean, it's very beautiful. And also, hearing your stories, Tara, of the past, what I am happy to say is that that's not all gone, and that there's like so much beauty in that. Like when we were out in the desert dancing with our Palestinian partners, you get to see that. Like when we opened up their caves, I think their caves had been locked for like 20 years. And some of those artifacts are still in there because the caves had been there and lived in for like 70 to 80 years, And so it felt like there was this emergence of that world that you're talking about. And I was just so honored to be there and be a part of that. And that's like the vision of like what we would love to see again,
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Tara, there's something really beautiful that you said that I wanted to just quote back and pull a question out of this. You said, I want to see people seeing Palestinians as humans. And that really hits in a very deep place. And I think it's something that has been seen across a lot of these kind of movements. You talked about the HIV crisis being another kind of moment where humans needed to be seen. I'm curious to hear from all of you, in what ways have you seen hearts shift towards that recognition of the human? And what are some ways that we can help continue perpetuating this knowledge, this perspective, and this belief?
I'm of the mind that, what we're experiencing, this incredible global shift in Palestinian solidarity, is something that Palestinians have been wishing for for 75, 76 years. This is for them an extremely revolutionary moment of solidarity that they never dreamed of. And I'm thinking about Gaza for a moment and how they've been, the Palestinians in Gaza, and let's not call them Gazans, they're Palestinians. They've had to go from the north to the south and from the south to the north. And I recently heard that they're not going to move anymore. They're done moving. So they are aware of the lens of the world being upon them. And they're ready, however extremely tragic it is to witness, they're ready to be martyrs for a free Palestine. And it's extremely moving. And, you know, for me, I've never seen such human beings. And I've never seen such dehumanization that is making, if I can call them, the Israelis my people, the Israeli military. I've never seen such monsters. And I don't think the world is going to forget that very quickly. We may be having this conversation in a year. We may not be able to have this conversation in a year, but we must have these conversations. We must remember that whether it's education or whatever the means are of the resistance that you're able to pursue, that you do pursue those avenues that are still available to us. So I really encourage people, even as we talk about humanizing Palestinians, to take a step into a deeper history, a deeper knowledge beyond, not that I don't have a problem with Instagram, but beyond the 1-minute videos of horror. Look into the poets, look into the writers, look into the artists, the dancers. You know, there's so much resilience and beauty that the world is going to need, that we in the U.S. are going to probably have to learn from how to survive and how to continue the struggle. So I urge you all, keep Palestine in your hearts and share that wisdom, share that tidbit of knowledge that you gained. Take that chance to have that difficult conversation. Hopefully you won't get ostracized like me.
Well, you kind of started getting into the Shakar, which was giving some encouragement over to the community who's here listening today. And I'm curious if there's one or two things that you'd like to make sure is kind of the final takeaway. This is our final question. One final takeaway you really want people to be walking away with today. What might that be? What would be something you'd like to hear out here that they can extend out to the next person that they speak with after this?
I would say for me, in a way, we're quite good at dehumanizing kind of everybody in order to survive, including, the people around us, Native Americans, Black people, brown people, Africans. There's just a lot of reasons why there's so many huge injustices in the world. And, I would just encourage everyone around you to kind of take a minute and be like, why is there so much injustice? When you just start to think about it for a second, it often comes around to the fact that othering people, and this is just such an ultimate act of othering, where I have this sort of Trump half brother, and it's oh my god, but he wants his guns, he wants his property, and Auda, that student I was telling you about, now has a family. One of the things that they do in the West Bank is they will not give building permits. So if you're going to be a Palestinian who wants a home, you just have to build it illegally. Then the military will just say, well, here's a notice. We're going to come tear it down someday. That may be 10 years from now. If you're lucky enough to have some internationals who come move to your village, it could be a while. But, Auda, like, half of his village was just torn down the other day. Like, the bulldozers showed up, and I just, like, when I'm talking to my half-brother, I'm like, how would you feel if, like, you could never get a building permit? I mean, think about the city council recall you would have. People in America get pissed off about the most minuscule shit, and you're just like, you would literally have your gun out. You think about the Bundys who didn't want to pay for their cows to eat grass, You're just like, when I try and bring it down to, like, what his concerns are, and I'm like, yeah, these people are, like, peaceful activists, and they're kind of pissed off that these bulldozers showed up and tore down their house. So, maybe, like, consider how you would react if the government did that to you, So, empathy.
Thank you. I would say, if this was like my little words of advice, would be advocate for Palestine. Empower yourself to speak about difficult issues of oppression and repression. And lastly, what was my last point? Organize. Get with bigger groups. Power to the people, right? We have a lot of power when we organize. So please, get into it, get involved. Thank you.
It's been just a very difficult time. I'm sure I've been depressed since October 7th, and I do see the world rallying for Palestine, and it's so hard to take joy in it with everything else that you see, the pain and suffering every day. Being half Palestinian and not knowing my Palestinian half, the second half of my life, I feel like I can really understand where a lot of Americans probably have come from since October 7th. I've had 25 or 30 years to have the unveiling of what life is like in Palestine for the last 75 years, and a lot of people have had that crash course since October 7th. So I just appreciate how far we've come so quickly. I grew up looking for faces that look like mine. Is that yours? Oh, hi, baby. See? Knowing I had Palestinian siblings, I'm used to, from a young age, looking at the TV for people that look like me. And now they're everywhere, and they're in pain, but also trying to show their strength and their love for God. And just continue, please, to see Palestinians as humans.
Thank you all so much. You have heard your invitation of what you can do next to be a continuous action towards this. Yes, we have a QR code. Please come on up and scan this. Do you want to share a little final blurb?
That's it. If you want to know what JVP Eugene is up to, scan this. I'm going to leave it right here.
Cool. It'll be right up here at the front of the stage, so just come on up and scan it when we're done. I want to take one more final moment. It takes a lot of emotional, mental, spiritual, and ancestral energy to tell stories like we heard today. Can we please give one final big appreciation, round of applause for our storytellers? Thank you all.